Hey folks, and welcome to the latest episode of Around Virginia, where we go around the state talking some high school football, and we're going to try to do it in rapid fire style and squeeze in about 19 games in less than 19 minutes, which will be hard for us to do. But we're going to give it an attempt anyway. 14 games of significance, and then 5 extras we'll throw in, and a couple of parting shots as well. First off, the games in Tidewater, where I reside, are monumental this week, and probably as big as they've been all year, with an undefeated collision with arguably the best rivalry in the state. It's certainly in the discussion of it. Phoebus versus Hampton. You think all the years those two programs have won combined more state titles than any duo for a rivalry you can find. Hampton with the great coach Mike Smith, 480 wins. He's third all time, 12 state championships. It's unheard of what he's done. All the great players in this rivalry, from Tyrod Taylor and Ronald Curry and Hall of Famers, and think of Phoebus with the success they've had under Bill D, who's no longer with us, and then Stan Sexton and now Jeremy Blunt, and they're trying to win their first state championship since 2008. This Hampton team in pursuit of its first since 2005. We thought a year ago they had a shot to maybe get to that state semifinal round, even though Class 5, or then Division 5, was loaded. This game, as I size it up, I look at it this way. Hampton's not really played a tough schedule. Their opponent's record combined is just 12-31. They don't have Daz Newsom. They don't have the massive line with Justin Redd, Jalen Powell, Elijah Conliffe in that group, but they do have some weapons out wide for quarterback Cam Stevenson with Jaquarius Bellamy and Johnny Gaskins and some of those guys we highlighted in the preview that's pretty in-depth on VirginiaPreps.com. Phoebus comes into me with the better defensive line this year, led by Juan Purdy, and then at back end with Latrell Smith, the transfer from Tab, Damian Charity, Darrell Bryant. I think they can contain that passing game enough to give themselves a chance to win the game ever so close. They have a budding sophomore quarterback star in Chris Daniels. He did get picked off 3 times against Woodside a few weeks back. If he takes care of the ball against a Hampton defense that did come up with 4 interceptions recently in a game against Bethel, held Warwick in check to 50-something yards, and Warwick's not a world beater. Hampton could get this win again in this series, but I'm going to give Phoebus the slight nod. In the predictions we had, my cohort, Coach Young, took Hampton. I took Phoebus. This is a game that's been a blowout lately. It hasn't gone on the wire, but I think Saturday afternoon at Darling Stadium, it should go on the wire, depending on what the weather situation is. We've got some rain and wind in the area right now. The other game in Tidewater people are keeping an eye on is Deep Creek and Oscar Smith. It'll be a raucous atmosphere in Chesapeake, where I'll be headed over to in just a little bit. It'll be the Tiger Cage, packed house, much like the Indian River Deep Creek game, but maybe even more so because of that 96-game Southeastern District winning streak that Oscar Smith has, and Deep Creek trying to snap it with Damian Everett running the football and Antonio Turner on defense, a real factor there. And I just don't think Deep Creek does it with a one-dimensional attack, a banged-up quarterback into Sean Jones, the backup Michael Ure might have to play in place of him. This is going to be a tough game for them to win at Oscar Smith. I think they keep it close. I think they're physical enough to be in the game in the fourth quarter. I just don't know if they have enough offensive firepower they can generate, enough punch to win this game against an Oscar Smith team that is playing lights-out defense themselves. All 40 teams, Deep Creek, Oscar Smith, Hampton, Phoebus, allowing less than 7 points per game. That is outstanding at this point in the year, and you're going to see some great defense and possibly some really low-scoring games. A game that will not be low-scoring as we go up to Northern Virginia. Josh again highlighted this in our Nova predictions. Freedom and Woodbridge, 2 teams that they come in unblemished, haven't lost a game. And I think there's 4 of those this week in the state. You have Phoebus, Hampton, Freedom, Woodbridge, Monticello, Louisa, and if I'm not mistaken, Luray Riverhead's also an undefeated matchup between 2 teams ranked highly in the state, Luray in Class 2, Riverhead's in Class 1. The Freedom-Woodbridge game is interesting to me because Freedom's running back Tyquan Brown was dinged up a few weeks ago when they won that game against Hilton. Woodbridge counters with some star power of their own in Deshaun Jerkins, the safety committed to Vanderbilt. They have some weaponry there for Coach Gary Wortham and the crew. Meanwhile, Darrell Overton's Eagles, they have A.J. Felton at quarterback as a dual threat guy. Eric Surratt's catching the ball really well. I think Freedom at home outlasts Woodbridge. But for Woodbridge, this is a real opportunity game. It's much the credibility game like Freedom had a couple weeks ago against Hilton. If Woodbridge gets this win, now they've really gained some credibility in the eyes of the state and now thrust themselves into the conversation of a team that can go into December in Class 6, which none of us really envisioned when the season started. I'm not sure a lot of people envisioned it for Freedom outside of their community and their team either. So a real interesting game there with Freedom and Woodbridge, 2 area-type rivals there colliding in that one. Go to the other undefeated games while we're thinking about it. Monticello and Louisa. You got Monticello's with that offense with Kevin Jarrell. They've just been putting up some incredible numbers. Jarek Ayers, and then they take on Louisa, who's got some offensive weaponry themselves. But they have that big stud on defense in Brandon Smith, and that could be the difference if Louisa wins this game against Monticello, who likes to air it out with Jarrell, and that's a game that could be scored in the 30s or the 40s. Should be a fun one there. Luray and Riverheads. I doubted Luray a week ago against Robert E. Lee Stanton. Shane Metland didn't. He picked it. I was wrong. He was right, much like he was right and I was wrong on Central Woodstock shutting me up against Clark County. I'm going to probably pick against Luray again, and it could bite me. They do have perhaps the best player on the field in quarterback Dylan Jenkins. Riverheads is the team to me, though, defending 1A state champs, and people were sleeping on them at the beginning of the year. I think they're strong up front more than people realize, and they just have that ability to win these games when you don't think they will. And this is a real test against Luray, though. So I might talk myself into picking Luray now that I really think about it harder. But why not? Let Luray get mad at me 2 weeks in a row and go against him here in this one. That's an interesting game of undefeateds, too. Galax and George Wythe, two teams that met in the postseason a year ago, or met last year. I know George Wythe ended up losing to Galax regular season, before they lost in the playoffs. I should correct myself there. And, I look at this matchup, and Deacon Beamer's the guy that's the quarterback difference maker for George Wythe, you'd think. But Galax, they had all these guys that you wondered about that were young, some freshman, sophomore types. And I spoke with Coach Dixon before the season, and he just, he was like, it could be maybe a year away. He sort of gave me that coach speak. And I really look at them now, and I think they're starting to click on all cylinders, much more so than George Wythe, which has had a couple of escapes, and they've played a pretty tough schedule. I think George Wythe, come playoff time, they'll start to sharpen things up and have that passing game going. But I'm going to give the slight nod to Galax in this game, which ended up beating George Wythe last year 45-20, with, as you know, getting to the state semifinals and losing. So I think Coach Mark Dixon's got a good group here, even though they're young. I think they'll get the W. Moving along here, Colonial Forge and Stafford. We've talked a lot about Colonial Forge here lately, and to say the truth, I think they will end up. This will be the game where I think they end up rolling. They've had some slow starts in some of these games. They were down at halftime against Appomattox, pulled away in the second half with Ethan Garwood leading the charge. I think their defense could be a bit too much for Stafford in this one, but it's another dangerous game for Forge, and if the Eagles keep playing with fire, they will get burned in the playoffs or by somebody with a slow start. Still number one in the state, still like them to win the state title in Class 6, but they've got that target now on their backs. Everybody's sort of shooting for them. A team that's had the target on their backs for years, LC Bird, the Skyhawks, when David Bedwell was there. Now you got Tony Nicely, and Bedwell's the AD at Bird. Bird had that tough loss early in the season after they beat Meadowbrook, got thumped real soundly by Thomas Dale in the Battle of Chester, and they don't have Rashard Ashby at linebacker anymore. They do have a stud defensive end in Hakeem Beeman, the North Carolina commit. Bird might have its mojo back. This will be a real telling game, a barometer game for them against Manchester with that quarterback in Vernon Clark, who is the verbal commit to Wake Forest. They did have the one slip up against Monacan. I'm going to go with Manchester in this game against perhaps my better judgment. Bird is generally the safer pick in a spot like this. I think their offense will be able to get enough mismatches to exploit against Bird in a game that's sort of in that low 20s, high teens. Let's call it like 23-19, something like that. A game that will be much, much, much higher scoring than that. GW Danville and Magna Vista. GW Danville's been putting up points in bunches, just outrageous numbers. And Magna Vista, they got thumped pretty good a couple weeks ago against an out-of-state opponent. They are 4-2. I think Joe Favera's group is starting to get themselves back in the mix here, reaccustomed to what they do this time of year, and they took a couple losses early. I'm going to go against a little bit of the grain here and pick Magna Vista over GW Danville, who's just been putting up, it seems like 40, 50 points, 60 points every week out. I think Magna Vista will find some kind of defensive solution in the second half. Not sure what it is, but they might find it in this game where the winner has to feel great about its chances here to get on a roll before the playoffs in this game. The loser seed could be affected greatly. Magna Vista in 3 and Danville in Class 4. Heading back to Tidewater for a second, Indian River and Kings Fork both are 5-1. Both had a fourth quarter or a second half double-digit lead Cologne at home. River has Oscar Smith a week from Saturday. Kings Fork has them end of the regular season at home. So the winner has to feel like they'll have another showdown coming with Oscar Smith. Both very evenly matched offensively. Defensive line studs. I'm going to go with Kings Fork at home in this one, but they cannot have the penalties and some of the mistakes they've had in some of these games get a little sloppy. I think they have just a little bit more firepower, which is saying something for all the athletes and talent that Indian River has. Even minus Devin Hunter, who's now at Virginia Tech, their top recruit from a year ago, who was rated in the top 50 in the country. Let's go to a few other games that caught my eye. Northumberland and Washington Lee, Class 1. We don't give you guys a ton of attention or love, but we're going to change that today. Washington Lee's won like 18 consecutive in this series, and I think they will continue to roll in this series. Northumberland's coming off a couple of losses. I had them ranked higher than W&L, but I just don't like the way Northumberland goes into this matchup ever since they've lost that first game to Trinity Episcopal Private School. Essex at Colonial Beach. Essex is ranked top 3 in the state. They did have the 1L to Sussex Central in a low-scoring battle early on in the year. Colonial Beach is coming in with a lot of momentum. Essex is a smarter pick, but I'm not always the smarter guy picking games. So I'm going to go with my if you call this a mild upset, Colonial Beach here to pull a surprise, as I like them in this game to get the job done against an Essex team that is good up front. They'd be even better if they didn't lose Jones to Bishop Sullivan Amartius, but that's the one I'm going to go with there. I'm going to go with Colonial Beach. That's my upset special if I can have one this week. Richlands at Marion, and this game caught my eye because Richlands has a funky record. They've played one of the toughest schedules in the state, any division. They're a Class 2 school, but they've played up, and they just played a grueling schedule, so they're much better than the record indicates. They did graduate a lot of guys from a year ago, including John Luke Asbury, their record-setting quarterback. But next week they've got Graham, who thumped Virginia High 45-7 on Thursday night. This is a game they got to get at Marion. Marion comes in with so much momentum, undefeated 7-0, and there's another upset special. But I don't think Richlands, with their name and their program and their tradition and prestige, beating an undefeated team is a major upset. I think they're going to get it done against Marion, who's had a great season to this point. But I just think Richlands is battle-tested and will be ready for this game. And that's going to be a good one there. William Campbell, the Generals at Appomattox, the Raiders. And I tell you what, Joshua Rosser has been putting up some sick numbers. He's the best player in the state nobody's talking about. You hear about the big-name recruit guys, the Kevon Pope, who's going to Ohio State from Dinwiddie. You hear about Dylan Spalding, the wide receiver from South County. You hear about Cole Beck from Blacksburg, who I've got a mini story to tell you about in a second, who just committed to Virginia Tech last week. Grayson Overstreet setting records at Stanton River. He's got another record he's approaching here. But the best guy nobody knows about in the state in terms of this guy is just a superhuman player for his team is Joshua Rosser at William Campbell. And I think he's going to put forth a great effort. It's just not going to be quite enough for this William Campbell team to stay undefeated against Appomattox. So that long winning streak snapped earlier this year by Heritage Lynchburg. I think they're angry. They got Devon Graves, a stud recruit of their own, in a corner wide receiver, versatile athlete headed to NC State. At least he's verbally committed there. I think Appomattox gets the W, and they start to get back in our minds as, all right, they're the team that, dare we say, they're the favorite in 2. I know Union's got the stud in James Mitchell, tight end, and Goochland's unbeaten, ranked number 1 at the moment, but Appomattox is still 2-time defending champ for a reason, and this is a spot where they can show it against a very good William Campbell team that has gone from unranked to number 4 in our Class 1 top 10. And I think that's the 14 games, the 5 extras I'm keeping an eye on. 3 unbeaten tests coming up here for some teams here, actually 2. Smithfield at Poquoson. Poquoson's unbeaten. Watch out for Smithfield with Willie Drew, the JMU commit. And then Norcom, who's undefeated at Lake Taylor, who they haven't beaten since 2010. Titans coming off a loss to Granby, unexpected. Norcom's got the great defense, but their offense has got to really step it up here. And then I'm keeping an eye on Dominion at Woodgrove. Both teams have been a little up and down. They've played some tough opponents on their schedule. Massaponax at Brook Point. Winner's got to feel good. Loser, it could be really dicey for your playoff time. And EC Glass at Jefferson Forest. That's a game where the winner in Class 4 is a dark horse that I'm going to be circling for a first-round opponent there in Class 4 for the playoffs. So those are your 19 games, and miraculously we did it in under 15 minutes. And I did not have to take a glass of water, and I took about 2 breaths. So we made it happen. Grayson Overstreet, he needs, I believe, 199 yards to break O.J. Thomason's record set at William & Byrd for the VHSL career yardage record. He broke the touchdown record a week ago. I think he'll get it. By the way, they have William Byrd next week. Stanton River does, with Larry Basham, who is a fantastic running back in his own right. One of the matchups we'll be talking about next week, as well as Centerville and Westfield, the Northern Virginia battle, the brouhaha every year. That is a must-see matchup in the Concord District. And as I promised, I had to mention about Colbeck. We sent out Player of the Week plaques, sponsored by our good buddy Bruce Pearl and Virginia Trophy. We thank him. We give it out to a state Player of the Week every week. Different guys have won it every week throughout the state. And I just want to say, this is no knock on other athletes who won them, and well-deserving and happy for them. But Colbeck is the only one who has shot me a thank you message for the plaque. And that stuck with me because it just showed that off the field, he's a quality young man. We know about him being a quality football player, and I just think that speaks volumes about Colbeck. So kudos to you. Congrats on your commitment to Virginia Tech. I know the Hokies are excited. The Blacksburg fans are too, and they are ranked number 2 in the state behind Dinwiddie in Class 4. Wouldn't it be something, a Dinwiddie-Blacksburg state championship? You never know. It might happen. So enjoy your football weekend wherever you are. It's raining hard here, and it's getting closer to Halloween. We might dress up in a costume for one of these. That could be scary, but a sight to behold. Enjoy your football weekend, and we'll talk soon on Around Virginia. Take care, everyone.